The airport was unusually loud that morning, voices mixing with rolling suitcases and announcements echoing through the halls. Mia, a flight attendant with 7 years of experience, walked quickly toward gate 41, wiping sweat from her forehead. It had already been a long day and she hadn't even boarded the plane yet. She was tired, stressed, and irritated, 3 things that never mixed well on a busy flight. But today, everything around her felt heavier, as if trouble was waiting somewhere in the air. The passengers lined up were restless and impatient. One argued about luggage weight, another complained about seating, a child was crying loudly, and an older man demanded to board early even though it wasn't his turn. Mia tried to keep calm, forcing a smile, but inside she felt her patience thinning with every second. She had barely slept, she had missed breakfast, and she already dreaded the 5-hour flight ahead. Near the check-in counter, she noticed a black woman standing in the boarding line. The woman looked calm, elegant, and confident, wearing a simple but expensive-looking coat and holding a small designer bag. She didn't try to push forward, didn't complain, didn't rush, she simply waited quietly, eyes observing everything around her. Mia didn't think much of it, she just saw another passenger in line. Once boarding began, the chaos increased. People argued about overhead space, someone tried to switch seats on their own, and Mia had to stop 2 passengers from fighting about who entered first. Her head pounded from the noise. When the same calm black woman finally stepped into the plane, Mia barely glanced at her, she simply guided her toward first class, or so she thought. But when Mia walked back into the first-class cabin later, she saw the same woman seated comfortably in one of the premium seats. Mia frowned instantly, she checked the seat number and assumed the woman must have taken someone else's spot. It was a common problem, passengers pretending they belonged to first class just to avoid confrontation. Mia walked over with tight shoulders and a tightening jaw. Today was not the day for more problems, she thought. The woman looked up with a polite expression, but Mia didn't see it as politeness, she saw it as a quiet challenge, a silent refusal. Mia asked for her boarding pass, her tone sharper than she intended. The woman reached into her bag calmly and handed it over without hesitation. Mia scanned it quickly, but in her frustration and distraction, she misread the seat code printed at the top. Her irritation grew when she believed the woman was sitting in the wrong place. Passengers around them watched, curious, some sensed the tension growing, their eyes shifting between the 2 women. Mia took a breath and asked the woman to move to economy class. The woman looked surprised, but not angry. She responded gently that the seat she was in was correct. Mia took this as an excuse, another lie she had heard many times before, her stress, tiredness, and judgment all mixed together, turning into a growing fire inside her chest. She leaned forward, her voice lower, saying that the woman could not stay in first class without the proper ticket. The woman stayed calm, simply saying she had the right seat. Mia felt her anger rising fast. In her mind, the woman's calmness looked like disrespect, like she was ignoring the rules, like she thought she was above everyone else. Mia felt heat forming behind her eyes, the kind that comes right before someone makes a mistake they cannot undo. The woman opened her mouth to explain again, but Mia cut her off sharply. More passengers were watching now, some whispering, some recording on their phones. Mia felt trapped in her own frustration. She didn't see the woman as innocent anymore, she saw her as a problem she needed to solve immediately, before things got worse, before passengers complained, before the plane took off. The woman started to rise from her seat to show her ticket clearly, but Mia misread the movement. She thought it was defiance, she thought the woman was refusing to listen. Her stress and impatience took over her logic, and in one terrible moment, everything inside her snapped. She reached out and smacked the woman across the face. The sound echoed in the quiet first-class cabin, sharp and shocking. Passengers gasped, eyes widened, phones shot up to record. Some covered their mouths, others froze in disbelief. The woman slowly turned her head back toward Mia, not with anger, but with a cold, powerful silence that made Mia's knees weaken. In that single second, Mia realized she had made the biggest mistake of her career. She knew she couldn't take it back. The woman didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't even speak. She simply looked at Mia with a calm that felt heavier than shouting, a calm that hid something Mia had not yet discovered, a calm that carried authority. And as Mia stepped back, breath shaking, heart pounding. She felt something strange in the air, something she couldn't name yet. She didn't know who this woman was, she didn't know what she had just done, she didn't know that this quiet passenger she just smacked was about to turn her entire world upside down with a single truth. The truth that the passenger she struck wasn't just a black CEO, but the billionaire owner of the airline itself. But Mia would discover that soon enough, and when she did, her life would never, ever be the same. The entire first-class cabin was frozen after the smack, but part 2 began with a different kind of silence, a heavy silence that felt almost alive. Mia stepped back, breathing hard, her hand shaking as if it didn't belong to her anymore. She stared at the woman she had just struck, trying to understand why she did it, trying to make sense of the storm inside her chest, but nothing made sense now, nothing at all. The woman, still sitting calmly, slowly lifted her hand to the side of her face where Mia had hit her. She didn't flinch, she didn't show pain. Instead, she looked directly at Mia with a gaze so controlled, so steady, it made Mia's heart pound even faster. The passengers waited, every eye fixed on the two women. No one dared to move, no one dared to breathe loudly. The tension was too thick, too sharp, too shocking to ignore. The woman spoke first, her voice soft but sharp like a blade. She asked, "Would you like to explain what just happened?" Her tone was calm but carried a quiet authority that made Mia feel smaller and smaller with each passing second. Mia tried to answer, but her voice refused to come out. Her throat felt tight, words stuck like stones that would not move. A passenger in the second row whispered loudly, "Did she really slap her?" Another whispered, "I think she recorded it." A few phones were still lifted, but most passengers were too stunned to even move their hands. Everyone had seen flight attendants get frustrated before, but this was something entirely different, something no one expected from a trained professional on a commercial airplane. Mia finally forced words out, but they came out clumsy and weak. She said she thought the woman was refusing to move from a seat she didn't pay for. She said she thought the woman was lying. She said she didn't mean to hit her. But even Mia could hear how hollow her excuses sounded. She knew the truth was simpler. She had lost control, and now she was trapped in the consequences. The woman tilted her head slightly, her calm expression never changing. She asked Mia if she had read the seat number correctly. Mia swallowed hard, looking down at the ticket she still held in her hand. She looked at the number again, this time more carefully, and her stomach dropped. She had misread it. The woman did belong in that seat. She had every right to be there from the start. A wave of cold panic rushed through Mia's body. The room spun for a moment as the truth hit her as hard as she had hit the woman. She tried to speak, tried to apologize, but her mouth felt dry and useless. Her eyes began to burn with humiliation, shame, and the dawning realization that her mistake was far bigger than she imagined. Before Mia could say anything, a tall man in first class pressed the call button, signaling for the captain or another senior staff member. The woman didn't stop him, she simply continued to watch Mia with calm, patient eyes. Mia felt her legs shaking under the weight of that stare. It wasn't the stare of an angry passenger, it was the stare of someone who held power, someone who expected answers, someone who was used to being respected. The other flight attendants rushed in, their faces filled with confusion and fear. They saw Mia standing in front of the seated woman, her face pale, her hands still trembling. They saw the fear in Mia's eyes, the calmness in the woman's, and the tension in the air. One attendant gasped and whispered to Mia, "What did you do?" Her voice cracked with disbelief. Mia whispered back that she thought the woman didn't belong there. Another attendant looked at the seat map on her tablet and immediately realized the truth. She looked at Mia with wide eyes, her voice low and horrified. "She belongs there, Mia, that's her seat." Mia felt her knees weaken. She had been wrong from the very beginning, dangerously wrong, unforgivably wrong. Passengers whispered again, louder now. Phones rose again. Some people looked angry, some looked disgusted, but most looked shocked that a flight attendant would ever strike a first-class passenger without reason. Mia tried to apologize, but before she could finish her sentence, the woman lifted her hand slightly, signaling her to stop talking. Mia obeyed instantly, something inside telling her to listen, telling her that this woman was not an ordinary passenger. The woman said calmly, "I will speak to the captain. I think you will want to know what happened here." Her voice held no anger, but the seriousness in it made Mia's heart pound even harder. Another attendant hurried to call the captain, who immediately responded that he was coming forward. His voice sounded urgent over the intercom, the kind of urgency that only appeared when something serious had gone wrong. Mia stood frozen, staring at the floor, silently wishing she could reverse the last 10 minutes, wishing she could erase the smack, the misunderstanding, the entire situation, but she knew she couldn't. She had crossed a line that could destroy her career, maybe even more than that. And as the passengers waited, and the captain's footsteps approached, Mia felt her life beginning to bend in a direction she could no longer control, a direction that would soon reveal a truth she was completely unprepared for, a truth that would shake her even harder than the moment she realized she was wrong, because she still didn't know who she had slapped, and the answer was about to break her world open. Began the moment the captain stepped into the first-class cabin. His face changed instantly when he saw the calm black woman sitting in the seat and Mia standing in front of her with trembling hands. The passengers watched him closely, waiting for his reaction, waiting to see how deep the trouble had become, but no one expected the look of shock that flashed across the captain's face when his eyes met the woman's. Captain Harris froze, then straightened his posture. His voice softened in a way Mia had never heard before. He said, "Ms. Harper, you're here today." It wasn't just respect in his tone, it was recognition, it was familiarity, it was the kind of tone people used only when speaking to someone incredibly important. The passengers exchanged confused looks, whispering quietly, wondering who this woman really was. Mia felt her breath catch in her throat. "Ms. Harper," she repeated silently in her mind. The name meant nothing to her, but the captain's reaction meant everything. Something was very, very wrong. The woman looked up at the captain with the same calm expression. She nodded slightly and said, "I am, and I think we need to talk about what happened here." Captain Harris's entire face tightened with worry. He already knew this was not a small situation. Before Mia could open her mouth, the captain asked the other attendants to clear the area. He told the passengers to remain seated and calm, assuring them that everything was under control. But even as he said it, he knew the situation was anything but under control. The flight attendants pulled the curtains halfway, but everyone could still hear the tension in the air. Captain Harris turned to Mia, his voice sharp but not loud. He asked her to explain what happened. Mia tried, but her voice shook. She told him about the misunderstanding, about misreading the ticket, about thinking the woman was in the wrong seat. Her explanation sounded weak even to her own ears. She admitted that she had let stress cloud her judgment. She admitted she had acted too quickly, too emotionally. But when she reached the part about the slap, her voice cracked completely. The captain's jaw tightened, disappointment settling across his face like a dark shadow. Then the captain turned to the woman, the one he called Miss Harper, and the entire cabin went silent again. Everyone sensed something powerful building in the air. Miss Harper spoke slowly, her voice smooth and controlled. She explained that she had shown her ticket, that she had tried to speak, that she had stayed calm. She explained that Mia refused to listen and became aggressive, and then calmly, she said the words everyone was waiting to hear. "She struck me unprovoked." The words hit harder than Mia's slap ever could. Mia closed her eyes, wishing the floor would swallow her whole. Her hands shook violently. She whispered that she was sorry, but the captain lifted his hand, signaling for her to stay silent. This wasn't the moment for apologies, this was the moment for truth. The captain then took a deep breath, his expression heavy with responsibility. He faced the woman and said, "Ms. Harper, on behalf of the entire airline, I apologize deeply." Mia looked up, confused. Why was he apologizing so intensely? Why was he addressing her like that? And why was his voice trembling? Then everything changed in a single sentence. Captain Harris said, "You are our owner. This should never have happened to you." Gasps exploded across the cabin. A loud ripple of shock moved through the passengers. Phones rose higher. Some people covered their mouths. Others whispered, "She's the owner. She's the owner of the airline." Mia felt her knees weaken so suddenly she nearly collapsed against the nearest seat. The woman she smacked, the calm, quiet woman she had treated like a random passenger, was the billionaire owner of the entire airline, Ms. Evelyn Harper. The name now made sense, and the weight of it crushed Mia's chest. She had not just slapped a CEO, she had slapped the topmost person in the entire company, someone with the power to end her career with a single sentence, or change her life forever with a single decision. Mia's world began to spin, her breaths grew shallow, her eyes filled with tears of fear and regret. She whispered again, "I didn't know, I'm sorry, I didn't know," but the words felt small, useless, floating in a room where silence carried more weight than begging ever could. Ms. Harper didn't react angrily, she simply looked at Mia with a steady gaze, the gaze of someone who understood power, responsibility, and disappointment deeply. She said, "The problem is not that you didn't know who I am, the problem is that you didn't listen, you judged, you reacted, you used your hand when you needed to use your mind." Mia felt every word hit her like another slap, each one sharper than the first. Passengers watched in stunned silence, realizing they were witnessing something that would become a headline, a viral story, a moment people would talk about for years. Captain Harris looked helpless, torn between his duty to the company and his sympathy for Mia, but he knew this was bigger than him now. Opened with a silence so deep that even the soft hum of the airplane engine seemed to disappear, Mia stood frozen in front of Ms. Harper, her chest tight, her hands trembling, her heartbeat so loud she could hear it echoing in her ears. The passengers stared, shocked and wide-eyed, still trying to process that the calm woman in a first-class seat was not just someone important, but the billionaire owner of the entire airline. Captain Harris cleared his throat, but even he struggled to find the right words. He had met Ms. Evelyn Harper only twice before, both times during formal company events, and she was known for being calm, quiet, and fiercely intelligent. She rarely appeared in public, rarely flew on her own planes, and hardly ever allowed herself to be recognized, but today she was here, in the flesh, and the entire aircraft felt the weight of her presence. Ms. Harper folded her hands on her lap, her calm expression unchanged, but her silence carried a pressure that made Mia's knees shake. It was the kind of silence that demanded truth, demanded reflection, demanded consequences. Captain Harris stepped forward slowly and whispered that they should move somewhere private to discuss the matter, but Ms. Harper lifted her hand gently, stopping him. She said, "Everyone here was part of this moment, everyone here saw what happened. I think it is better they hear the truth with their own ears." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Mia's breath caught painfully in her throat. She knew what that meant. Ms. Harper wanted this discussion to happen publicly. No secrets, no hidden corrections, no quiet fixes. Mia felt the sting of fear crawl across her skin. She wanted to disappear, to vanish, to rewind the moment she lifted her hand earlier, but there was no escape now. Ms. Harper turned her gaze to Mia, her voice calm but firm. She asked, "Do you understand what you did?" Mia nodded quickly, tears forming in her eyes. She whispered that she had misread the ticket, misunderstood the situation, let stress take over her judgment. She said she didn't mean to slap her, but Ms. Harper cut her off gently. "Meaning is not the problem here, your behavior is." The words hit harder than any slap could. Mia's throat tightened again. She tried to apologize, but Ms. Harper's steady eyes held her still. Ms. Harper explained that she had boarded quietly on purpose. She wanted to experience her airline from a passenger's point of view. She didn't want special treatment, didn't want staff panicking around her. She wanted to see how people were truly treated. But instead she got a lesson no owner should ever receive. Passengers listened in stunned silence. Some looked angry at Mia, others looked sad for her. But no one doubted Ms. Harper's words. The truth was crystal clear. Ms. Harper wasn't upset because she had been mistaken. She wasn't angry because she wasn't recognized. She was disappointed because a staff member had judged and punished someone without listening, without checking properly, without humanity. Captain Harris finally spoke, his voice low and respectful. He said they would file a formal report immediately. Mia would face suspension, and the airline would take full responsibility for what happened. But Ms. Harper shook her head softly, her calmness more powerful than any raised voice. She said, "This is not just about punishment, it is about understanding why something like this could happen." She turned her gaze toward the passengers and said something no one expected. "I built this airline because I believe travel should feel safe and respectful for everyone." She continued, "If even one employee treats a passenger with aggression before listening, then we have failed. I have failed." The passengers nodded, some even murmuring in agreement. Others whispered that they had never seen an owner speak so honestly. Then Ms. Harper looked back at Mia, her voice softer but still steady. "I am not here to destroy your life, Mia, but I am here to make sure this never happens again." Mia felt her knees buckle slightly from relief and shame mixing in her chest. She whispered that she would accept any punishment, any correction, any training. Ms. Harper nodded as if she expected that answer. But Mia wasn't prepared for what came next. Ms. Harper said, "I will decide your fate after this flight, but right now, I want you to continue working until landing, calmly, respectfully, professionally. The entire cabin gasped again. Mia's eyes widened in shock. She couldn't believe she was allowed to stay on duty after what happened. But Ms. Harper wasn't finished, she said. I want to see how you treat people when you know better. Not when you are angry. Mia felt a tear roll down her cheek. She wiped it quickly and nodded with trembling hands. She understood this wasn't forgiveness. This was a test she could not afford to fail. As Mia walked away to continue her duties, every passenger watched her, watching to see if she would break, if she would rise, if she would change. Meanwhile, Ms. Harper sat back in her seat calmly, her expression unreadable, her decision still hidden from everyone. Began the moment the plane lifted into the air, but this takeoff felt different. The engines hummed normally, the wheels left the ground normally, yet the air inside the cabin felt tense and electric, like everyone was holding their breath for something unseen. Mia stood in the aisle with shaking hands, trying to pretend she was calm, trying to pretend everything was normal. But every step she took reminded her that she was walking under the watchful eyes of the billionaire owner she had just smacked. Passengers whispered as she walked past them, some avoided her eyes, others stared at her openly, a few even pulled their phones back out, ready to record if things went wrong again. Mia felt every stare like a heavy weight dragging behind her. She kept adjusting her uniform, smoothing her hair, wiping her eyes when no one looked. Her mind replayed the slap again and again, tormenting her, burning her with regret. In first class, Ms. Harper sat calmly, looking out the window as the clouds drifted by. She wasn't angry, she wasn't shouting, she wasn't demanding anything, but her calmness was terrifying. It was the calmness of a person who already knew what would happen next, a person who didn't need to raise her voice to show power. The captain had returned to the cockpit, trusting the cabin crew to handle themselves with dignity. But everyone knew this was Mia's test now, a test given not by the company, but by the owner herself. Mia moved through the cabin offering drinks. Every time she passed by Ms. Harper, her heart tightened painfully. She spoke politely to every passenger, but her voice trembled each time. A man in seat 3B asked for water, and Mia almost spilled the entire bottle because her hands were shaking so much. Another passenger gently told her to breathe and calm down, but those words only reminded her of her mistake. Finally, Mia reached Ms. Harper's row. Her chest tightened so much she almost forgot how to breathe. She forced a gentle smile and asked, "Would you like something to drink?" Her voice cracked. The question felt too small, too fragile, too shaky. Ms. Harper looked up at her, her gaze steady but not unkind. She asked for tea, simple and clear. Mia nodded quickly and hurried away as fast as she could without running. In the galley, Mia leaned against the counter, breathing hard. Her fellow attendant stood beside her, whispering nervously. No one knew what to say, no one knew how to help her. One of them whispered, "Maybe she will forgive you." Mia shook her head with tears in her eyes and whispered back, "I don't deserve forgiveness. I made a mistake no flight attendant should ever make." When Mia returned with the tea, she held the cup carefully with both hands, trying not to spill a drop. She placed it gently on Ms. Harper's table and stepped back, hoping to escape quickly, but Ms. Harper spoke before she could leave. "Sit for a moment." Mia froze. Her entire body stiffened. The passengers around them fell silent again, watching every second as if it were a scene in a movie. Mia slowly sat in the seat across from her, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Ms. Harper looked at her, not as a billionaire, not as an owner, but as someone observing a human being who had made a painful mistake. She asked, "Do you know why I am disappointed?" Mia nodded weakly, tears blurring her vision. "Because I hit you," she whispered. But Ms. Harper shook her head gently. "No, I am disappointed because you didn't listen, you reacted without understanding, you let stress control your hands instead of your judgment." Mia felt her chest tighten again. She lowered her head, ashamed. Ms. Harper continued, "I built this airline to give people safety, comfort, respect. What you did today broke that trust, but it can be rebuilt." Mia's eyes widened. She hadn't expected those words. She thought she would be fired immediately, banned, ruined. But Ms. Harper was giving her something she didn't expect, a chance, a tiny opening toward redemption. Passengers listened quietly, some touched by the billionaire's wisdom, some amazed that she showed so much restraint. Mia wiped her tears and whispered, "I will change, I promise, I will never act like that again." Ms. Harper nodded, her expression unreadable. "I will see how true that promise is during the rest of this flight." The words hit Mia with a mix of fear and hope. Her fate wasn't decided yet. Every action she took from this moment forward mattered, every word she spoke mattered, every moment of kindness or patience mattered. As Mia stood and returned to her duties, the entire plane could feel the shift. Something was happening, something bigger than a mistake, bigger than a slap. This was a turning point, a moment that could define whether Mia's career ended in shame or grew into something wiser and stronger. Began not with chaos, but with a strange, uncomfortable quiet that spread through the plane like a slow-moving wave. Mia moved through the cabin with careful steps, her hands steadying slightly now, her voice soft but respectful. She offered drinks, answered questions, helped passengers with blankets and bags, and every action felt like walking through fire, because she knew every pair of eyes was watching her, waiting to see what she would do. Ms. Harper watched quietly too, not with anger, but with a sharp, thoughtful gaze. She was not looking for perfection, she was looking for sincerity. She wanted to see if Mia's regret was real, if her apology came from fear or from understanding. Mia felt the weight of that gaze every time she stepped into first class. It made her spine straighten, her voice soften, and her heart beat harder. As the flight continued, turbulence shook the plane lightly. It wasn't severe, but enough to make passengers uneasy. Mia steadied herself and moved from row to row, reassuring everyone, telling them everything was okay. One older woman grabbed Mia's hand tightly, her eyes filled with fear. Mia knelt beside her, whispering comfort, reminding her that turbulence was normal. The woman calmed slowly, squeezing Mia's hand in gratitude. From her seat, Ms. Harper watched this moment carefully. Her expression softened just a little. She wasn't looking at the mistake from earlier anymore, she was looking at the person Mia could be, if she chose to grow instead of hide. Mia didn't notice the softened expression, but other passengers did, and they whispered quietly among themselves, wondering if things were changing behind the billionaire's calm mask. Halfway through the flight, a sudden cry came from economy class. A child had spilled hot soup on his arm and began screaming in pain. Panic erupted as his mother called for help. Mia ran toward the back without hesitation, grabbing a first aid kit as she moved. Other attendants rushed behind her, but Mia took control quickly. Kneeling beside the crying child, she spoke softly, wiping his tears, cooling his arm with water, checking his skin carefully, calming the mother who was just as frightened. Passengers watched from their seats, whispering about her gentle tone, her calm actions, her focus. One man said softly, "That's the kind of person she really is." Another replied, "Everyone makes mistakes, but this shows she's trying." Ms. Harper remained in first class, but she could hear the commotion from where she sat. When Mia returned, her face was flushed but composed, and her hands no longer shook. She walked to the galley to disinfect her hands, then turned, and found Ms. Harper standing behind her. The air between them felt heavy again. Mia's breath caught, unsure what Ms. Harper would say. She straightened her posture, trying to look professional, but she could feel her heart pounding violently. Ms. Harper studied her face for a few seconds before speaking. "You handled the emergency well." Her voice was low but warm. Mia blinked in surprise, her eyes widening. She whispered, "Thank you." Ms. Harper continued, "Your reaction to the child shows who you really are, not who you were an hour ago when you let anger win." Mia felt tears rise again, but she controlled them. She nodded, whispering, "I'm trying to be better, I'm really trying." Ms. Harper nodded slightly, "I can see that." Then she added, "But your final test is still ahead." Mia's breath froze. She swallowed hard and asked, "What test?" Ms. Harper did not answer immediately. Instead she said something that made Mia's heart thump painfully. "Growth doesn't happen when things are easy, it happens when things challenge you. Watch the cabin, listen to the passengers, show me who you want to become." Then she walked away, leaving Mia standing in the galley with her thoughts racing. A few minutes later, something unexpected happened. A group of passengers from economy class walked forward, asking to speak with the captain. They said Mia had helped the child with incredible care. They said she was patient, responsible, calm. They said they wanted the captain to know she had acted with kindness. Mia's eyes filled with emotion as she overheard them. She didn't expect anyone to defend her, not after what she had done, but these strangers stood up for her. Their voices were sincere, honest, and full of gratitude. The plane continued its journey, the tension slowly shifting into something else, something fragile but hopeful. Mia moved with new confidence, not arrogance, but a quiet strength that grew with each step she took. Miss Harper watched silently, her expression unreadable, but something in her gaze hinted at changing thoughts. As the landing announcement echoed through the cabin, Mia knew the moment of truth was coming. She knew her future rested in what Miss Harper had seen, in what she believed, in the decision she would make after landing. Began the moment the wheels touched the ground. The landing was smooth, but inside the cabin, every heart felt heavy with expectation. Mia stood at the front of the plane as she always did, but this time her breath was trapped in her chest, her fingers curled around the seat in front of her, and she could barely stop them from trembling. She knew that once the doors opened, once the passengers stepped out, her fate would be waiting just beyond the jet bridge. Passengers gathered their bags slowly, some whispering about the dramatic flight, others glancing at Mia with sympathy or curiosity. A few offered her small nods of encouragement as they passed, some even whispered thank you for helping the child earlier, but Mia hardly heard any of it. Her eyes kept drifting toward Miss Harper, who remained seated until everyone else stood, calm, composed, unreadable. When the captain announced that first-class passengers could leave first, the entire plane held its breath as Miss Harper stood up. She didn't rush, she didn't look angry, she simply collected her coat and walked toward the exit, but instead of stepping off the plane, she stopped in front of Mia. Passengers who hadn't exited yet turned around to watch. The other attendants froze, waiting. Miss Harper looked directly into Mia's eyes and said, "Walk with me." The words felt like a command and an invitation at the same time. Mia nodded quickly, wiping her palms on her uniform as she followed her down the jet bridge. Her legs felt weak, but she forced them to move. Airport staff and ground crew noticed the two women approaching, the billionaire owner walking beside a nervous flight attendant. Whispers spread like a ripple in water. People recognized Miss Harper, even without cameras around, and they wondered what had happened, why she was here, and why Mia looked like she was walking toward her destiny. Once they entered a quiet meeting room near the gate, the door closed behind them, leaving Mia and Miss Harper alone with the silence. The pressure hit Mia instantly. She almost collapsed into a chair but held herself upright, knowing this moment mattered more than anything she had faced before. Miss Harper placed her bag on the table and looked at Mia with a calm that made the room feel smaller. She didn't shout, didn't accuse, she simply asked, "Do you know why I brought you here?" Mia nodded weakly. "Because you're going to fire me," she whispered. But Miss Harper shook her head slowly, surprising Mia. "No, firing you is easy, but easy things don't change people," she said. Mia stared at her, confused. The woman she had slapped, the billionaire she had humiliated, was not here for revenge. She was here for something deeper. Miss Harper continued, "You made a mistake, a big one, but you also showed who you can become. You calmed a frightened child, you comforted passengers, you tried to correct your behavior." Mia lowered her head, tears forming again. She whispered that she never meant to hurt anyone, that she loved her job, that she loved helping people. That stress took over, but she regretted it completely. Miss Harper listened without interrupting, then said something that shook Mia to her core. "I am giving you two paths, choose wisely." Mia lifted her head, her heart racing. Miss Harper held up one finger. "First path, you resign today, quietly, respectfully, no scandal, no public embarrassment. You walk away and start fresh somewhere else." Mia felt her chest tighten painfully. The thought of leaving her dream job shattered her heart. Then Miss Harper held up a second finger and said, "Second path, you face the consequences, you face public criticism, you attend mandatory retraining, and you work directly under supervisors who will watch you closely. You will rebuild your reputation from the ground up. It won't be easy, it won't be comfortable, and it won't be quick, but it will give you a chance to grow." Mia's breath hitched. For the first time in hours, she felt hope, a small, fragile spark of hope. She asked in a shaky voice, You're giving me a chance." Miss Harper nodded once. "I am giving you a chance to prove that your mistake does not define you, but only if you are brave enough to face the hard road." Mia didn't hesitate. "I choose the second path," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I want to earn back what I broke, I want to be better." For the first time, Miss Harper's expression softened into something close to a smile. Then she said, "Good, because I believe people deserve a chance when they show true remorse." Outside the door, the captain and several airline executives waited nervously. When the door opened and Mia stepped out with red eyes but a steady posture, they knew something important had happened. Began with Mia walking through the terminal beside Miss Harper, her heart pounding but her step steadier than before. Passengers who had been on the flight watched them pass by, whispering about the billionaire owner and the flight attendant who had slapped her, but instead of anger in Miss Harper's posture, there was calm authority, and instead of fear in Mia's steps, there was a quiet determination. Once they reached the private lounge area for airline executives, Mia was asked to wait outside while Miss Harper spoke with the board members who had rushed to the airport. Through the glass wall, Mia could see them speaking in low, serious tones. One executive shook his head in disbelief. Another nodded as Miss Harper explained something with calm confidence. Mia felt nerves twisting in her stomach, but she kept reminding herself that she had chosen the hard path, the honest path, and that meant facing whatever came next without running. Minutes felt like hours as she waited alone, thinking about everything that had happened, the slap, the passengers' gasps, the truth, the reveal, the flight, the child she helped, the apology she felt in her bones. Every detail replayed in her mind, but now it felt different. It felt like the beginning of something instead of the end. Finally, the door opened and Miss Harper motioned her inside. Mia stepped into the room carefully. The board members looked at her with a mixture of disappointment, curiosity, and expectation, but none of them spoke. They waited for Miss Harper, because ultimately, the decision belonged to her. Miss Harper stood beside Mia, facing the board, and spoke with a steady, quiet strength. She said, "This problem is bigger than one slap. It is about training, pressure, burnout, and judgment. If we punish only her, we learn nothing. If we learn from her mistake, we change everything." The room went silent. Everyone knew she was right. Mia looked at her in disbelief, realizing Miss Harper wasn't protecting her. She was using her mistake to rebuild something broken in the system. Then Miss Harper turned to Mia and asked in front of everyone, "Are you willing to help us improve this airline, not as someone perfect, but as someone who understands what went wrong and wants to make it right?" Mia felt her chest tighten with emotion. She nodded immediately, whispering yes with her voice trembling. Ms. Harper explained the new plan. Mia would keep her job, but she would be removed from flights for a short period and placed in a new training program designed directly by Ms. Harper's team. She would learn communication, emotional control, conflict prevention, and leadership. She would return to the skies only after proving her growth. The board agreed, impressed by the fairness of the solution. When the meeting ended, Ms. Harper walked Mia back to the main hallway. Her expression was softer now, like she had finally accepted Mia's choice. She said quietly, "You will make mistakes again in life, everyone does, but what matters is how you rise after each one." Mia nodded, tears filling her eyes. She whispered, "Thank you for giving me a chance." Ms. Harper looked at her and replied, "I gave you an opportunity. You earned the chance yourself." Weeks passed, and Mia began her training. It wasn't easy. She faced tough instructors, emotional exercises, role-play challenges, and lessons designed to confront her weaknesses. Some days she cried, some days she doubted herself, but every day she worked harder, remembering the child she comforted, remembering the passengers who defended her, remembering the billionaire who didn't destroy her but chose to believe she could be better. Meanwhile, the incident became a national story. But the part that people talked about the most wasn't the slap, it was the second chance, the unusual kindness from a billionaire owner, the transformation of a flight attendant, the idea that mistakes did not have to end a person, they could also begin them. 1 month later, Mia stood at the gate in her uniform again, her posture strong and confident. She wasn't the same woman she had been before, not the stressed, exhausted, reactive person who slapped someone in anger. She had grown, learned, rebuilt herself. As she stepped onto the plane for her first flight back, she saw Ms. Harper sitting quietly in first class again, this time with a soft smile. Mia approached her and asked gently, "Can I get you anything?" Ms. Harper looked at her with a calm warmth and said, "Just do your best, that's all I ever wanted." Mia smiled, a real, steady smile, then nodded proudly and returned to her work.